Story 1. I had a student tell me that sometimes his dad got drunk and asked his mom for things. As I was starting to tell him he didn't need to elaborate any further, he continued with, like soup, and he yells it like, soup. It took every bit of restraint to not laugh. It's been years and years since that happened, but I still laugh when I think about it. Story 2. Not a teacher, but this happened when I was 17 at school camp during a bonding exercise. Teacher, tell us 2 truths and 1 lie about yourself, and we have to guess the lie. Weird kid. I play PlayStation, I like Doritos, and I am an alcoholic. Teacher, the lie is you are an alcoholic. Weird kid. Got you, I play Xbox. My God, the look on the teacher's face. Story 3. In my public speaking class at a community college, we had to get up and give a speech about an experience that really changed our lives or an important memory and how it made us who we are. On the first day, a guy who was a veteran volunteered to go first. He proceeded to talk about the day he was captured and sexually assaulted by an enemy soldier and how he now goes around and helps other soldiers with the Wounded Warrior Project. It was difficult for anybody to follow that. He was one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Story 4. I teach middle school, and this one still takes the cake. A student said that his mom and dad shared the same parents. I asked him to clarify because I didn't understand, and he said, I only have 1 set of grandparents. They had the same parents. I quickly moved to the next student, so no one else would realize that this kid had just told the class his parents were siblings. I talked to him about it the next day in private, and he said he got it mixed up. His parents don't have the exact same parents. They shared a dad. I felt so much better when the mom called me to let me know her elderly stepfather married her husband's elderly mother. Still weird, but much better. Story 5. My arm is messed up, y'all, in the deepest southern drawl, and proceeded to wildly swing his messed up arm around. He was 12, had Erb's palsy, and also got detention that day. He might be one of my favorite students. Story 6. Not a teacher, but I just did a first aid course. During introductions, say your name and 1 fact about yourself. A man says proudly he once had over $300,000 of unpaid parking tickets. Story 7. A student, not a teacher, but once we were going around a circle during percussion camp in the front ensemble, and my teacher goes, hello everyone. My name is Unsettling, and I have, unfortunately, soiled my pants as an adult. Definitely one of the stranger stories I've heard. Story 8. Student told me that there is a chapter dedicated to him in a dental surgery textbook because of a very rare disorder that he had as a child. I may still have that essay. Story 9. During an introductory activity for my new class, a boy, aged 9, got up and said, my dog has to wear a cone on its head because dad had his bollocks cut off. Story 10. I was an English as a second language teacher in Indonesia, and a student once told me every morning she cleaned the sheet on her bed. I asked her to clarify, worried she had a serious digestive issue. She answered, I brush my teeth, wash my face, and clean the bed sheet. Bed sheet. Story 11. My dad clogged the toilet this morning, and that's why I'm feeling frustrated, said a 5-year-old child. I will say the question was, how are you doing this morning? But I could barely keep from laughing out loud. Story 12. Not a teacher, but I was a helper in a middle school classroom. A young girl, who seemed uninterested, said with no hesitation that she can chug an entire bottle of beer. She got expelled later that year for keeping drugs in her locker. Story 13. I am not a teacher, but this guy in my class named Shane has this medical condition that causes him to grow a lot of hair at an early age. Full beard in middle school. He would say, I'm Shane and I'm very hairy. Story 14. We did one of those 2 truths and 1 lie games. A girl stands up and says, I have never been out of the country. I am a twin. I love playing sports. I knew this girl beforehand and knew she did not have a twin, so I picked that one. Nope. She had a conjoined twin that died in utero and had to be surgically removed, and she is now missing the last vertebra on her spine. She showed us the scar and everything. Apparently, the lie was the first one, as she had been to Mexico. Story 15. Not me, but my brother. He told the teacher, last night, My family ate beaver for dinner. I was much older and had left home by then. The class laughed, the teacher accused him of lying, the principal was brought into this, and my mother had to go in for a meeting. She chewed them up one side and down the other because we had a cousin who was a trapper, and he had sent a batch of beaver thighs for the family to enjoy. Although my brother was telling the truth, he told me later that he did say that for the effect, disrupting the class. Story 16. I teach English as a second language, and every lesson we start the class by sharing something good that happened to us over the last week or so. Needless to say, kids share the most random things ever. I have many weird stories because of that. We enforce a rule that they need to share good things so they don't start one-upping each other over whose grandma had the worst death. One day, a student said, "I was riding my bike over the weekend when I fell. I could see where it was going but didn't have enough time to enforce the rule when he just spat out. I fell over a wire fence and cut my neck. It just kept gushing blood. A lot of blood." I reminded him that we were only sharing good news when he said, "It's good because I'm still alive." I had a good laugh and agreed, but the damage was done. Every kid after him wanted to share about the most horrific injury they had or witnessed. Story 17. That he has been to juvenile detention multiple times and is currently on probation. Then he pulled up his pants enough that everyone could see his ankle monitor. That was something. Story 18. A guy in my class introduced himself by telling us how he decided he wanted to study philosophy because one day he was really high, peeing in the street, and he saw a couple of people working and he wondered what they were doing. So he realized his passion was wondering. He dropped out like 2 months later. Story 19. My friend is really quiet. He doesn't really talk unless spoken to. He's really cool, though, and has some things he enjoys doing. Literally, in the second year I knew him, the teacher asked about his hobbies, and he said he's a professional bowler with a best score of 300. I was like, "Why haven't you told me this? That's amazing." I guess it just never came up. Haha. I knew him for a whole year and never knew that. Story 20. Had students aged 11 sharing strategies for dealing with difficult emotions, one at a time in a big circle. One girl talked about digging her nails into her face whenever she was feeling stressed or anxious, and I had to explain to the class why self-harm was not a good coping strategy. Story 21. When I was in my first year at university, my law and society professor made each student get up, say his or her name, and tell why they picked law school. Well, a guy got up, said his name, and the professor interrupted him by asking, "Are you related to X?" The guy replied, "Yes, professor, he is my grandfather." Then the professor got excited and started talking about what a great guy X was and that he hadn't heard of him in years. Then the professor asked how he was, and the guy replied, "He is dead, sir." The whole class was trying to hold in their laughter. It pretty much broke the class that first day. Story 22. Someone in a class once told everyone about how his grandparents were arrested for keeping a bunch of adopted children in cages. He said that he used to play with the kids when he was young, but he was too young to understand that the conditions they were in were not normal. They kept kids in cages and locked in rooms for years before they were discovered and arrested. Fun fact. Edit. I am not a teacher. This person who told the story was in a class with me as a young adult. Story 23. In my psychology class, we were talking about the early signs of serial killers, and the quietest girl who never spoke told the story of when she lived in Chicago. She had a friend around 5th grade who would always stomp on baby birds and once put his hamster in the microwave. His parents were having difficulty keeping up with his antics, so they sent him to his grandmother's, whom he promptly stabbed to death when she woke him up for school. So that was interesting. Story 24. I was in one of the first small required classes for my teaching degree, and everyone in the class was studying to teach. It was day 2 or 3, and we were doing a get-to-know-you activity where we shared something about ourselves. I don't remember the exact question, but it had something to do with what you regret or would take back. A guy came in late when almost everyone had answered the question, and the professor asked him the question. He thought for a moment and said, "I regret letting my friend talk me into dropping acid." The class was silent for a good 20 seconds until the professor said, "Maybe next time we only share things that are legal." I hadn't seen him in any other teacher classes since. Still laugh about it to this day. Story 25. In the context of having students introduce themselves one by one to a new boy in a small high school class, a girl said her parents got her a nose job and a breast augmentation. Story 26. I have 2 thumbs on this hand. I am raising cockroaches in my closet to sell to the reptile shop. Thank you for the silver. I want to clarify that these quotes come from different kids, but it's definitely more entertaining to imagine them being the same. Also, I learned so much about cockroach raising from the comments. I wish I had asked more follow-up questions at the time. Story 27. Not a teacher, but the daughter of one. My dad had a student tell him during the fun fact question in detail about how his goldfish died that morning and how he experimented on their corpses. He had pictures on his phone of the skin off and the intact skeleton next to it. He is a successful taxidermist now, so silver linings, I guess. Story 28. My first year as an earnest and ideological teacher in a very rough underserved area. I got all the students in a circle on the first day to talk about what we had done that summer. I pointed to a student who had been engaged with me before class and said, "What did you do this summer that could inspire us?" His answer, "I did the last 2 months of a sentence for stealing a car." I hadn't expected that. So I pointed to another student and said, "Okay, that's great. Let's talk about what you did this summer." That student said, "Yes, I had such a good summer. I went to camp and..." Let me stop lying. I did the last 2 months of a sentence with that guy because I stole that car with him. Story 29. It wasn't weird, but actually cute and funny. I was teaching 5th grade, and this kid, white as paper, goes, "My name is Unfiltered, but you can call me LeBron." He had an obsession with LeBron James, and I did, in fact, call him LeBron whenever I wanted to get his attention. Great kid. Story 30. I am a teacher from the United Kingdom, form tutor to a Year 7 class of 11-year-olds. To get to know each other on the first day, I had them take turns to say their name, which primary school they have come from, and an interesting fact like their favorite food or color. We got to the last kid in the class, and his fact is that he has 6 fingers on one hand. Coolest kid ever. Story 31. Taught elementary school the past few years. One kid told me he was a dragon when he was born but changed into a human as he got older. He was absolutely convinced and couldn't be persuaded. Story 32. Okay, so I had psychology back in the spring semester before COVID hit, and I sat next to a girl who I was good friends with from high school. The professor asks her for a fun fact, and she said, "I like to watch people get cut open." She obviously said it for effect, but she cleared it up by saying she liked watching videos of people getting plastic surgery because it's satisfying to watch. Story 33. Oh my, not a teacher, but the student, introducing ourselves around our grade 10 social studies class, and my introduction goes, "Hi, I'm Cat Bomb 4. I'm blah blah blah, and I really, really like trees. Like I swear I have a tree obsession." The teacher gives me a what the heck look and goes, "Okay," and quickly moves on. I confused fetish with the word obsession. Still weird, but holy smokes, I did not mean to say I'm sexually attracted to trees. Story 34. Even though I am a professor, nothing that has ever been revealed by this question has ever been as awkward or uncomfortable as an occasion that happened when I was still a student. This was when I was in my Master of Fine Arts program for creative writing. If you have never been in an arts program before, it probably will not surprise you to learn that they can attract some weird personalities. It was the first day of a fiction workshop, and the professor decided that he wanted us to all share something interesting about ourselves. For some reason, one girl, Ashley, decided that this would be a good opportunity for her to tell us about her long history of drug abuse and the equally long period of mental psychosis she went through as a result of it. She did not do this as a quick answer either, but as a long, drawn-out list of every single drug she had ever experimented with, followed by a catalog of every single delusion she suffered as a result. The only one I can remember now is that at one point she became convinced she was a millionaire, and her family was hiding her money from her. All of this was delivered in a monotone monologue with her eyes glazed over that lasted at least 5 minutes, which was met at the end with a long, awkward silence before the professor said, "Well, that was definitely something interesting," and moved on to the next person. Story 35. I was teaching a 10th grade honors English class once, and this pleasant young woman unexpectedly used the C word. I hadn't had any trouble with her whatsoever, so I was a bit shocked. The whole class went dead silent. I told her she couldn't use that word in class, and she was confused as to which word I was referring to. Finally, I said, the C word. She repeated it and then admitted she didn't know there was anything wrong with it because her parents use it at home all the time. The rest of the class let her know it was bizarre that she was using it. Edit. She was not Australian. Story 36. Not a teacher, but on the first day of 9th grade, we had to form a circle and say one thing about ourselves that we thought was unique. When it was this dude's turn, let's call him Mike. Mike stands up and says in a really serious tone, "My mom and dad grow weed." His house got raided the next day, and his dad got arrested. Story 37. Not a teacher, but a guy in a few of my high school classes used to always say he met Ron Jeremy if the class was doing 2 truths and a lie. He wasn't lying, and would always show the class the picture they took together.